Well, with just 5 days until Donald Trump takes office, Canadian officials gave an update on their $1.3 billion plan to secure the border. This plan includes leasing 2 Black Hawk helicopters that will be used for surveillance. 60 new drones have already been deployed, and the government has begun setting up surveillance towers along the border. They're also acquiring new technology, such as X-rays and handheld chemical analyzers to curb drug smuggling. The Prime Minister says nothing is off the table if the U.S. moves forward with tariffs. And here with me at the table is David McGuinty, the Minister of Public Safety. Minister, congratulations on your promotion. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me, David. It's great to be here.
This border plan that you've spelled out with a little bit more detail, because we kind of knew the broad strokes. What's your sense whether this is enough for the United States and for the incoming Trump administration?
Everything we're hearing back from our American counterparts is positive. In fact, Tom Hillman, the border czar, came on national television in Canada and said he was very encouraged. So we're just going to keep moving forward. We're working not only between government departments here, but we're working with our provinces, we're working with big city mayors, with business executives, and we're also working and meeting with our American counterparts. And so everything we've seen thus far is very encouraging.
The one constituency that really matters, though, is Donald Trump himself. And there's been no sign, at least in his public rhetoric, that he's moving off what he is threatening to do. In fact, it sort of went from tariffs to economic coercion to turn us into the 51st state. So I know Secretary Hillman is as close as we can get, probably, but any idea of how the president-elect personally is feeling about this?
No, I haven't spoken to the president-elect, but I think we should take him at his word. We should take him seriously, but I don't think we should necessarily fixate on it. I think what we should really worry about is actually making progress on our border plan, which is exactly what we're doing. Measure after measure after measure is increasing the security, the safety, the efficiency of our border. It's good for Canada, and it's really good for the United States. So my job as the Minister of Public Safety is to make sure that we operationalize this, that we execute on the plan. And so far, I'm just coming back from Quebec, where I was in Montreal at the port, where I was at the largest border crossing into New York State, and just spent 2.5 days in British Columbia on our waterfront and on our border set up there. And I can tell you that the message breaking through with our American counterparts is extremely positive.
Right, but it's hard not to fixate on a 25% tariff. I mean, $1.3 billion is a lot of money, but measured up against the consequences and the economic toll of what President-elect Trump is threatening to do, I mean, it's dwarfed, right, in proportion. So I wonder your thoughts on what we heard from the First Ministers today. You know, the Prime Minister and Doug Ford are on the same page. Danielle Smith is refusing to sign on to the communique, and the Premier of Alberta says she can't support the federal government's response on this because they won't rule out using Alberta oil as a bargaining chip.
Look, I think this dialogue has got to continue. I remain hopeful. I think we can find a way forward. We've done it before. We've dealt with President Trump version 1. I think we can deal with President Trump version 2. I think it's just a question of going back at it, keeping the dialogue alive, and finding our way forward. Look, I can tell you on the border side of this, there is really no daylight between the provinces, the federal government, and different actors. We're united in this. We're moving forward, and we're implementing, and I really take my hat off to Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Quebec, who are really stepping up and helping the federal government, that's leading this initiative. If we can build on that kind of consensus, David, on the border, I think we can find our way forward.
But where are things now, though, on this, Minister? Because, you know, Danielle Smith is the one Premier who's been to Mar-a-Lago and who met with the President-elect. This was brokered by Kevin O'Leary, who tells Donald Trump to ignore your government and ignore your Prime Minister. And now she's saying she won't sign on to this because it's her energy, and that is not to be exposed to a trade war as far as she sees it.
Yeah. You know, David, I grew up in a family of 10 brothers and sisters. This is striking, very similar to some of the dining room table conversations over the years. There are always differences. We have to find our way forward. I'm sure we will. I'm sure that when Premier Smith sits down and talks to her own folks, there's always an opportunity to find common ground. And like I say, I think the common ground we've got right now is on the progress we're making on the border. It's very well received here, and it's very well received in the United States. I hope as we continue to expand on those measures, keeping in mind things like, less than 1% of the illegal migration going into the United States is coming from Canada. Less than 1% of fentanyl is coming from Canada. So we're reminding our American folks of this. Our Canadian folks are coming together. We've met with all the provinces. very united in this, and I think we're going to find our way.
I come from an Irish family too. It's not as large as yours, but I feel that if someone came at the family, we'd all band together for that fight. Even if it was a big bully we might not be able to take on, and we'd take the beating. That's not happening here today. There is an outlier, and it's an economically important and politically connected
It's
one.
just, we're in the throes of this. And it's difficult to know exactly what we're responding to, David. We haven't heard from President Trump yet. We should take him at face value. There's no doubt about it. But at the same time, we should, I think, anticipate that it may not be what he's saying it will be. Maybe it'll be something else. But all I can control as the Minister of Public Safety is making progress on that border.
Well, the measures we've seen so far on immigration, on visa restrictions and stuff, not your portfolio, but you and Minister Miller were there today, has seen a reduction of people coming in and then going south. You've put out data on that. How do 2 Blackhawks and 60 drones make the border more secure? Because I appreciate that's a big capital investment, but this is a big, long border with a lot of, unpatrolled areas.
It's a long border with unpatrolled areas, and it's a long border with patrolled areas. So it's a question of combining what we already have, including cameras, including the RCMP's role in setting up surveillance systems, working with our American counterparts. They've got systems, we've got systems. This will add to what already exists. David, we have a really strong border. We have to remember this. We're just going to make it stronger. It'll be to the benefit of Canadians and to the benefit of Americans.
If it's not enough, and there are more demands from the president-elect that require more money, you need Parliament, and right now we don't have it because of the prorogation, and then you're facing confidence votes, and you know what the other parties are saying. Can you do more if that's what the president-elect demands and you see those requests as reasonable?
I said this morning in a press conference that I'm convinced that good faith and goodwill and putting 41 million Canadians ahead of one's partisan interests is achievable here. And I really believe that the border is not partisan. I believe that all parties want to do right by Canadians. And so we'll see where we're at when the time comes. I'm not at all opposed to the idea or negative about the possibility that we're going to come together for whatever time it takes, if we need to pass emergency regulation, legislation, or request for money.
Some of them, though, might see their partisan interests as aligning with the national interests, and that the situation your government is in right now is bad for the country and weakens its ability to respond to what's happening in the United States. So, I mean, it seems to me it might be tough to convince them to come around to your line of thinking as you just laid it out.
Oh, it might be, but I mean, I always believe that the best way to manage relationships is actually to talk to each other. And I think that dialogue today continued, and it will continue again tomorrow. So I'm hopeful, remain hopeful. I think at the end of the day, good faith and goodwill will overcome this.
Okay. Well, Public Safety Minister David McGuinty, thanks for being here. We'll see where that dialogue is on Monday or Tuesday after Donald Trump is back in power. We appreciate your time, sir.
Thanks very much.
We've got a special guest who's coming to the studio while you're having that conversation as Canada's ambassador to the United States, Kirsten Hillman, who was part of these meetings today and part of a lot of meetings, I would imagine, in Washington, D.C. over the last while. Ambassador, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you. I'm doing well. It's fun to be in a group. I never get to be in groups.
You're at
it's exciting.
We've had a lot of groups around this table since the 6th of January. I wonder what your thoughts are on where things stand right now in Washington, because you've been part of a lot of conversations. We've talked to Jonathan Wilkinson earlier today, David McGuinty, Dominic LeBlanc, and others about what they're hearing. What are you hearing in your conversations with people in Washington about how real this threat of tariffs is for Monday?
Yeah, so I am talking daily to Republicans, primarily Republican lawmakers, and then people who are around President Trump, some of his nominees, some of his appointees. A lot of it is information out, especially for the nominees and appointees. They have to be very careful about not getting too involved with foreign governments before they actually are confirmed. But senators in particular have been a really important source of dialogue for us, because the president is he has a majority in the Senate, but it's not a huge majority. So, and a lot of those senators we have very strong relationships with, care a lot about the relationship with Canada and making sure that, our joint economies stay strong. So that's who I'm talking to. I have a number of governors too. Last week I think I talked to 6 governors. This week I've talked, what are we now? This week I've talked to 6 governors.
Right.
And in a nutshell, what I'm hearing is we don't know what he's going to do. There are all sorts of different kinds of theories that are being floated. 25% tariff is what he has said he would do, but he said it was because of the border. We have come back with a very powerful border plan that has been very well received by the people around President Trump, and which I know has been presented to him himself, because the person that presented it to him told me about it. So, but that hasn't been enough to, have him say, okay, well, that's great, we're done here, unfortunately. That being said, I think our message is getting through. But the other thing that I'm hearing, as all Canadians will hear if they're following this closely, which I know many people are, is that he really believes in tariffs as a tool to achieve a variety of different goals. And so I'd like to say that we know what's going to happen. I suspect we won't know until Monday the 20th.
It's remarkable that we're that close to that date and still that uncertainty. But you say he believes in tariffs as a tool. Obviously, you can see the negotiating position it's given him to use this as leverage. But, I was reading in a Politico article, I think, about this Robert Lighthizer paper, his former trade representative, that they believe tariffs generate revenue, force manufacturers to relocate inside the United States. That will lift economic activity and give them the revenue to finance tax cuts that will offset the hit that tariffs may have on prices. I mean, is it your sense at this point that the tariffs are to get you to do the things you've done on the border as an ambassador and as a government, or it really could just be a way of financing even more tax cuts through the Congress?
So what we think he might be motivated by, what he says from time to time he's motivated by, what he could be motivated by today or tomorrow, I don't think that kind of a sort of speculation is in Canada's interest. This is a serious matter, and we need to take it, methodically and seriously. And that was really one of the things today that made me very, very pleased, is that was absolutely the approach that the Premier's brought to the table with the Prime Minister and Ministers LeBlanc and Joly. So what that means in practice is he has said it's the border. We said, you know what, yes, we want to lean into the border, and we put a proposal on the table. It has been well received. What other, motivations or demands he may have, we're not going to act in relation to a motivation that hasn't been actually put on the table for us. And if it is put on the table for us, we will then decide how to react in response to something concrete and real, but not in response to the speculation. Because you know what? Otherwise, we're in 4 years of kind of chasing around, trying to figure out. We cannot do that. We have to start from sort of in the way we expect to go forward, as they say, which is clear, firm, and fact-based relationship.
Look, and I appreciate that. I remember sort of the mantra that the Trudeau government adopted during the first Trump presidency and the NAFTA negotiations was respond to actions, don't respond to words. But it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's an even greater level of uncertainty this time around compared to the first time, because there were more traditional Republicans in that administration, people who had been in government before, understood the Canada-U.S. relation away. The party has shifted. The people around him have shifted. It seems we know even less as a country about what the intentions and outcomes may in fact be. Is that fair?
I think we were kind of also surprised last time. So I think we should learn from that. And we should learn from, he's a negotiator. This is his style of negotiation. It's putting a whole bunch of things up in the air, getting people to kind of be distracted by a whole bunch of things that are going to happen. I believe on the 20th of January, a whole bunch of announcements are going to be made. I think that's what most people are hearing. Those will also be designed to kind of get people distracted. I mean, they're designed to obviously put forward his main agenda.
Sure.
But everybody's going to be like rifling through those in a way that is unsettled and unsettling. And it's essential for us not to do that. Canada has power in this relationship, right? We may be a lot smaller, but what we do with the Americans is very valuable and important to them. We are an ally geographically, we're an ally economically, we're an ally sort of culture is kind of a funny way to put it, but on the world stage, we are
shared
more
values.
often aligned with them vis-a-vis even our other allies. And so that is a very important feature, and that is something that many Republicans are talking to me about. It's a question of timing as to how and when we deploy the tools that we have in this relationship, because our toolbox is a little smaller, so we have to deploy it strategically and carefully and properly.
Well, the toolbox is a little smaller, and one of the premiers said today, one big tool should not be in that toolbox. When you go back to Washington, you have to make the argument to the Americans about the importance of Canada. What does Daniel Smith's dissent from the common approach we saw today do?
Well, I mean, Americans also have dissent within their system, and it's not something that they're unfamiliar with. My preference would be that all of Canada speaks with one voice, but I am not the one deciding that. I think that what everyone did agree on today in this discussion is that Canada will need to respond. If, first of all, obviously we want to do everything we can to make sure these tariffs don't get into place.
Of course.
That's a given. Secondly, we want to focus on the work that we've done on the border. Third, we want to focus on all of the areas of opportunity that we have together, including in energy and all sorts of other areas that will become much more difficult, and if not impossible, to undertake if we are in a tariff battle back and forth. So all of that everyone agreed with, and then also everyone agreed with sort of the principles of how Canada would react, based on the facts, based on what the Americans do, in a proportional way, in a way that's fair across the country, in a way that doesn't disadvantage one, region of our country over others, in a way that we stand together. Right up until that, I think that we were, the leaders around the table were very much in agreement. And on the idea, though, of export tariffs, which is a tool in our toolbox for any product, not just energy, of course, anything we export, Premier Smith didn't agree.
Right, so there's broad agreement on the principles, but it's the specifics. But the specifics matter in a situation like this.
They could. But again, I think we got to not get over our skis, as they say, out in the Rockies. So we've got to take it one step at a time and see where we go with this as it emerges. And I would say to all Canadians, we are a strong country. We've got, as I say, we've got a lot to bring to this relationship. So let's take it one step at a time. Let's understand the tools that we have. Let's stand together and be methodical about it. That is what we did last time. It will work, because in contrast to sort of many, many things happening all at once, which is what I expect will be happening in Washington. He also has a legislative agenda. He has a border agenda. He has a lot going on, and a new team to get up in place. If we are organized and clear and firm and strong and united, we will make the most of the tools we have. Yeah, look, we are a strong country, but they're a stronger country, and stronger economy, stronger in so many ways. But I wonder, in your conversations with senators and others and governors, they know tariffs are just bad for everyone, right? Like, is there anyone that you've spoken with in the power structures of the U.S. that says this is a good idea by the president-elect, and this is something that we want to see as a national policy, or do they just think, as you sort of laid out, this is bargaining, and he's using it to get concessions? There are a few people who also believe in tariffs as a tool for raising revenue. Well, they do raise revenue, but our argument, of course, is they raise revenue at the expense of all sorts of revenue lost, and on balance, it's better not to put the tariffs on and to do more revenue-generating activity with Canada. But there are certainly people who see this as an important tool on raising revenue. There are people who see this as an important tool for reshoring manufacturing, as you said. Right. And there are people who see this as an important tool for leverage. The president is first among them. But there are a few people around him that also have that sort of economic view. But most of the people, and especially people who are senators and governors who are responsible for their electorate that have brought them in, they recognize with the deep integration. We're their number one customer, right? Canada buys more merchandise from the United States than, I repeat this a lot in the US, I will repeat it for Canadian audiences, than China, Japan, France, and the UK combined. Right? And so it will hurt them to get into this sort of dynamic with us. So just the last question, because I've gone over time and I got to let you go. But Daniel Smith came away from Mar-a-Lago thinking his mind hasn't changed. Tariffs are inevitable. Doug Ford has warned the same thing. What do you think? Should we brace? Is it almost certain that on Monday we're going to see, or Monday or Tuesday, whenever he does it, some sort of trade action against Canada from President-elect Trump? I hesitate to say almost certain, but most people I talk to think there's some version of a tariff action that will be put forward, whether it's on us, whether it's on others, whether it's one of the many ways in which it's been floated, I don't know. I hope that they're all wrong, but I think we have to be ready for that.
Canada's ambassador to the United States, Kirsten Hillman, we appreciate you coming in on a busy day. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.